What's up? What's up? How y'all doing? Welcome to another episode of Starlight Beacon. Man, I got a good show for y'all today. We're going to be talking about not the rumors, but the new news that we got about the Skywalker Academy being trademarked by Lucasfilm, and also the Heir to the Empire and some other books being moved into what they call the Essentials Legends Guide, which is awesome. That has implications for a lot of different things, and we're going to talk all about it. First thing though, I need to see what's up, if this chat is popping up on screen like it's supposed to. I do see the chat on this side over here, but man, yeah, what's going on? How y'all doing? Happy Sunday, by the way. Of course, happy Sunday. But yeah, okay, there it is. It's popping up. It's popping in. All right, we're good. We should be good to go. All right, so I am streaming to Twitch as well as YouTube right now. Can you guys hear me? Let me drop the music just a little bit. All right, here we go. Lower the music. How's that? How's it coming through? Oop. Hit my mic. We good now? Volume wise, good to go. What's up, Mr. Loaf? What's up, Daddy Dorian? What's good? Hey, Ma, how you doing? Producing behind the scenes as usual, as always. Okay, so I'll lower the volume. Y'all let me know if it's still too loud or what. I'm still trying to get this volume situation under control, getting used to that. A lot better. All right, I'm gonna jump in. Well, no, it's not. That's here we go. Carol, what's going on? Welcome to the stream. Okay, so let's get into this a little bit. Move this over here. Make some adjustments. All right, here we go. All right, much better. Thank you guys. Thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate the feedback. Making some adjustments live on the spot. That's cool. Okay, so like I was saying, let me make sure I got this queued up, which I do not. I'm going to share my screen. Bear with me for a minute. That should be up now. No. Tab. All right. Well, I thought I had this pulled up. Give me a minute. Is it not sharing that? Anyway, all right, let's talk about this Luke Skywalker news for a minute. Well, not Luke Skywalker news, but the Skywalker Academy being trademarked. Now, there were a few people earlier in the year, or in the week when this news first broke, that said, it's not that big of a deal, don't read too much into it. But I beg to differ, and here is why. There are a couple other things that happen along with this that should get fans like myself and others excited about this news, because what it could mean. The Filoniverse, as we have been discussing for a couple months now, with the name drop of Grand Admiral Thrawn in season 2 of The Mandalorian, sends some interesting implications about the future of Star Wars, especially the future of Star Wars on Disney Plus. If you couple the Skywalker Academy news with this new Essential Legends collection that Del Rey has put in place, with Heir to the Empire being one of the main books in this Essential Legends guide, you can start to piece together how we start to get more new content regarding Star Wars coming to Disney Plus and to other platforms, but I think it's mainly to Disney Plus. The serial format is what Dave Filoni is known for with his work with the Clone Wars and also with Rebels and the Mandalorian and what have you. I think Disney Plus is a great place for this time period in which Heir to Empire takes place, which is right after Return of the Jedi, same time period as the Mandalorian. Disney Plus is a great place for all of this content to exist because it's longer form. And if they start to pull material from Legends like Heir to the Empire, where Grand Admiral Thrawn made his name, and where fans like myself and others who rave about Grand Admiral Thrawn as a character, this is the period in time where he where all of this stuff happened. And Dave Filoni is not shy about pulling characters in from Legends. He did it with Thrawn. I mean, prime example is Thrawn, because he pulls Thrawn into the Rebels series on Disney. What was that? Disney XD when Rebels premiered. So, he's got a track record of being open to pull this material into his stratosphere. So, Skywalker Academy, just to give you some, it wasn't called Skywalker Academy, but he had a Jedi Praxium, which was where he began to train the next generation of Jedi a couple years after Return of the Jedi, Luke Skywalker, that is. What he did in this was he began to, as he's training this first generation of Jedi, this is where we get, Jedi like Cal Katarn, the video game from the late 90s, early 2000s Jedi Academy and Jedi Knight Jedi Academy 2 also take place in this in Luke's Jedi Temple, his Jedi Temple, his academy, if you will. These events transpire there. You're a student there. In this game you're a student. He doesn't take on younglings early on. He takes people that were about his age, so like in that 16 to 19 year age, and starts to train them in the Jedi arts. He was known for basically deviating from the Jedi Council of old, that they took Force sensitive from birth and raised them in the ways of the Jedi. Luke was taking Force sensitives at any age really, and training them in the ways of the Jedi. So he had a different philosophy because of the state of the order at that time period. He had to find some students. He had to get some new recruits. He had to do what he had to do to get the order established and be a real force in the galaxy. So that's kind of sort of where Grogu and Luke Skywalker, sorry, spoilers, I'm gonna be talking heavy spoilers in this, just all around. So if you aren't up on all of this, just bear with me, because I'm going to be talking about Rebels. I'm going to be talking about The Mandalorian season 1 and 2, especially season 2, and just all the content thus far within the Skywalker saga, I'll say. So that in mind, if you do don't want any spoilers, then this is your opportunity to turn away now. But I'm going to get into it. So Ahsoka Tano name drops Thrawn in season 2 of The Mandalorian. We also have Luke Skywalker coming to rescue the Mandalorian and thus Grogu at the end of season 2. Now, the cash cow that Grogu became, as well as Luke Skywalker, there's no way they're not going to pursue this in other mediums and other genres. There's no way that this is going to be something that they just drop and we never see Grogu again and we never see Luke Skywalker. I never thought that that we would see Luke Skywalker in season 2 of The Mandalorian. I never really thought that we would see Luke Skywalker at all in The Mandalorian point blank period. But the fact that they brought him in, and the fact that he takes Grogu, and now you've got two of your biggest, cash cows for Star Wars in the last 5 years, that being Luke Skywalker and Grogu, together, you'd have to imagine that Disney and Lucasfilm was looking at that like, yo, we need to go and do something with this. So them trademarking Skywalker Academy sounds like we're going to get not only stuff in the theme parks, but also in all of their other mediums, like looking at this Skywalker Academy. The Force Awakens takes place about, is it 30 or it's like 30 or 40 years after Return of the Jedi. So you'd have to imagine that at least it's possible that Luke was able to train at least one generation of Force users in the Jedi ways before Kylo Ren destroyed the temple, his academy, if you will. So even still, you know what I'm saying? Like, we know that Luke had a temple. He was training Jedi at some point. They don't really establish at what point he started training Jedi, so that's a nice little loophole, if you will, that they can fill. Kind of sort of retcon, kind of reverse engineer the story to kind of give Luke his just due, because they introduced the idea of Luke being a Jedi Master and a Grand Master and someone who had his own order in the sequel trilogy, but we don't see it. We see it destroyed, and we don't know how successful he was as a teacher. And being that this is the legendary Luke Skywalker, we'd like to imagine that he at least had a few success stories before the thing was destroyed. So there is an opportunity, there is definitely time that would allow for Luke Skywalker not only to train one and maybe half a generation, 1.5 generations before a young Ben Skywalker becomes a part of the Order, but he does. I think they can, one, introduce this concept as well as kind of re-engineer the Heir to the Empire story that Timothy Zahn wrote back in I believe in the 90s is when that book came. No, it was the 80s, maybe late 80s, early 90s. Can't remember when it was originally released. I didn't read it, of course, when it was originally released. I read this sometime in the 2000s, so forgive me, I don't really know when it was actually released. But that being said, Luke Skywalker being in The Mandalorian, we know that the Filoniverse, Jon Favreau, have been behind the scenes working on a lot of content for Disney Plus related to Star Wars. We know that Lucasfilm has ambitions, to not only continue creating more Star Wars content, but to feed more content to Disney Plus and run a lot of content through Disney Plus. So that begs the question, how much of this content are they going to, put on this platform? What are the stories they can tell? Which brings me to this point of Heir to the Empire, because like I said earlier, Heir to the Empire takes place during this same time period as The Mandalorian. Grand Admiral Thrawn is introduced in this. We get a name drop of Grand Admiral Thrawn at the end, midway through in that Ahsoka episode during season 2 of The Mandalorian. She name drops Grand Admiral Thrawn. She is actively looking for him. She wants to know where he is and what he's up to, and because he is a threat for sure, as a character and just as a being. We know Ahsoka has had dealings with Thrawn prior to this time period, because in Rebels he was one of the main adversaries in the last two seasons. I want to say, yeah. Last two. I think he was introduced in season 3. So, which is a deviation from his original story, because in Heir to the Empire, he wasn't a prominent figure in the Empire until after Return of the Jedi. Because as an alien, the Empire is xenophobic, so they don't look highly upon aliens. That's something that they've maintained, even in the new Disney canon. Like, aliens aren't, you're not going to see a lot of aliens within the military ranks of the Empire. That's just been a part of the Imperial culture since they kind of started expanding a lot of the material. So that's been a through line for them for many generations, like many years now. So in his original story in Heir to the Empire, he was just basically working his way up through the Imperial ranks. The events of Empire Strikes Back happen, Vader being killed and the Emperor being killed and a lot of the Imperial forces being destroyed in the subsequent battles after the destruction of the second Death Star, which is basically, the same environment that the Mandalorian has created for the Empire. You've got this Imperial remnant. You've got these number of warlords who are actively trying to create, trying to fill this power vacuum. You've got Moff Gideon, for example, who is one of these warlords who has amassed an Imperial contingent to his cause. He seems to be serving the Emperor, or at least it's implied that at least he has some sort of contact with the Emperor on Exegol. He hadn't said it directly, but it seems like he's a part of the First Order. We know that the Mandalorian series is supposed to establish the beginnings of the First Order. So I'd be interested and curious to see if, Grand Admiral Thrawn has also his hand in the creation of the First Order. But we also know that Grand Admiral Thrawn has allegiances and loyalties to his people, the Chiss, out in the unknown regions, who, in Heir to the Empire, that wasn't as much of a story point. His loyalty was to the Empire. Like, he was 100% on board with the Imperial cause. So that was there's a deviation between the stories, but it kind of creates an interesting dynamic between the Empire, the Chiss, and Thrawn. Even in his new novels that Timothy Zahn has written, which I've got up here, we get a little bit more story and backstory on Thrawn and his connection to the Chiss and the Chiss ascendancy, and there is a looming threat to not only the Chiss but also to the Empire. We know that in the new Thrawn novels, he's actively trying to build an alliance between the Chiss and the Empire, as well as trying to get the Empire and the Emperor to understand that the Chiss are not an enemy and they are a potential ally to the Empire. But if he doesn't help the Emperor, that is, if the Emperor doesn't help the Chiss, then he could potentially be facing an existential threat, because the Grisk Thrawn fears are a very real threat to the Chiss people and to the ascendancy. So you've got all of these dynamics within the new canon that weren't prevalent before, and I'm very interested to see if that's going to be something that they continue with, if that's something that they'll expand upon now in live action, being that we know that these characters are going to appear. And now with the Empire, if you will, well, not necessarily the Empire, but um, Heir to the Empire becoming an Essentials Legends guide, that means that they're going to be pulling inspiration, at least from the Heir to the Empire story, and either adapting it for the Ahsoka series and or for Mandalorian season 3, or Thrawn could possibly be getting a series of his own. So all of this, really, these are all the implications of this news breaking this week. An Essentials Legends Guide means that Del Rey, Disney, Lucasfilm basically are looking at the content that they've created in the past that was deemed legends, and now they're bringing it into they're creating a hierarchy for it. Here are the stories that the fans over the years have fallen in love with, that aren't a part of the main canon, but are probably integral to what we're going to do now moving forward. This is speculation. This is not what Del Rey has said. This is not what Disney or Lucasfilm has said. But by the action of them doing this would imply that, yes, this is the direction that they're going to take. So that is an interesting proposition, in my opinion, for Lucasfilm to be taking, because we know they've already been taking steps to start reintroducing characters and events from Legends back into the canon. Now this is more of a definitive type of, Legends EU fans, we're acknowledging that these stories that you guys fell in love with prior to this acquisition are very important to the history of Star Wars. But it also says at the same time that we understand how important these stories are to you. We understand how good these stories are, and we're going to now find a way to incorporate them into the stories moving forward. And so, with this 30-year time gap between, not Empire, but Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens, like, you've got a lot of material to cover. You've got a lot of things that you could possibly be exploring. Like, what was Luke Skywalker doing for those 30 years? Like, how soon did he create his temple? Was he able to create any Jedi before the temple were destroyed? What happened to them if they did? What happened to Grand Admiral Thrawn and Ezra Bridger? We know, spoilers for Rebels, that at the end of season 4, the fate of both Ezra and Thrawn is kind of left unanswered, alluding to a sequel series or a show or like a movie down the road that would kind of take that storyline and continue with it. The epilogue scene for that series is Ahsoka Tano and what's my girl, Sabine, going off into the unknown regions to find Ezra. So does this happen before? Did that epilogue scene happen before or after we saw Ahsoka in season 2 of The Mandalorian? I'm going to wager that it's after, which is why she doesn't take Grogu. I think she knows that she's actively looking for Grand Admiral Thrawn and Ezra, because if she finds one, then she'll likely find the other. And being that, I guess they don't really elaborate why she's specifically looking for Thrawn. We know that, you would know that if you'd seen Rebels, that she's looking for Thrawn to find Ezra, but it doesn't necessarily, explain to the everyday person who Thrawn is, why she's looking for him, and what is his significance to the story. So, all of that being taken into account, you've got to, it kind of makes you ask yourself, okay, Heir to the Empire and the Imperial story within The Mandalorian is very similar. Like, they've pretty much taken a lot of the elements of the Imperial Remnant directly from the Heir to the Empire story. Now Del Rey is saying, okay, this is an important book that you should, well, not you should read, but if you want some context for what we're doing, you should probably check this one out. Fans have been saying, yeah, go check this out. This is a great book. When Thrawn was introduced or reintroduced into Rebels, everyone was like, yo, you got to go check out Heir to the Empire. And then the new Thrawn trilogy came out, and we are like, yo, go check those out too, because those are pretty good. It introduces some new characters and some new plot details and more backstory into Thrawn, which is cool. They also offer some new insights between the relationship between Grand Admiral Thrawn, Vader, and the Emperor. We know more about how connected they are and what the relationship is between those three, and also Tarkin, because Tarkin plays a key role early on in that relationship. Like, those are pretty much the four horsemen, if you will. It's the Emperor, and then it's really Tarkin. It's the Emperor and Tarkin on more or less the governing side of things. Like, he doesn't have any competition. Like, the Emperor trusts him with the governance of the Empire, and Vader and Thrawn are kind of sort of in contention for the Emperor's favorite military leader, if you will. Like, who's the tactician? Is it, you know, Thrawn with his military mind and genius, or is it Vader with his, you know, force powers, brute force, and, you know, him being Darth Vader and the fear? And he needs them to kind of work together, but also compete with one another. It's a very interesting dynamic. I like that element of these new trilogy. But after, in this period post Return of the Jedi, with the Imperial Remnant, you'd have to imagine that, you know, Tarkin's gone, Vader's gone, the Emperor is gone. You've got all of these. We don't know how many of the Imperial officers and higher ups have survived. We got a general idea. We got the Race Loans and the Moff Gideons and others who have a contingency of followers that are loyal to them, but we don't know how many are included in this effort to have to build the First Order for the Emperor. Are there other factions that aren't a part of this First Order rebuild, that aren't directly connected to the Empire and to the Emperor over in Exegol, that are trying to just use the power of the Empire, or what's left of it, to acquire power for their own? I think it was established that Moff Gideon wasn't one of those. He somehow got an inside track to the Emperor. We don't know what that connection is, but he wasn't doing this for himself. His main goal was to help the Emperor rebuild the First Order. That was strongly implied. What is Thrawn's play? We know that from the new trilogy that Thrawn felt like the Chiss Ascendancy, their military, especially their spacecraft, were not up to date with the technology, you know, outside of their region of the galaxy, of their region of space. They had fallen behind the Emperor. Technologically, the fleets of the Empire were better equipped than the Chiss fleets, and Thrawn wanted to use some of that technology that the Empire and the Republic and the CIS were using in their ships to retrofit and to update the Ascendancy chips. And he was lobbying really hard with the Emperor to, you know, build an alliance with the Chiss and sort of broker a deal for, intel and technology, and allow, the chest to be sort of like this first line of defense, really, for any external threats from outside of the known galaxy that the Emperor could be facing, which I think he had, pretty much before the events of Rebels and, his disappearance. I think he had started to win the Emperor over a little bit, which was good, but then Rebels happens and we don't know where it goes from there. A character from Heir to the Empire, which is Captain Paleon, is also introduced in the Ron trilogy, the new trilogy that is, and he's a significant character in Heir to the Empire. He's the Watson in the situation. Like, if you know Sherlock Holmes, or if you read Sherlock Holmes, Watson is kind of there to explain to the audience the mind and how Sherlock is processing and approaching a situation. And that was Paleon's role. Like, he was just there to explain to us, the readers, what Thrawn was thinking and how he was moving and why he was doing what he was doing. So he's introduced in, what book is that? I think it's the third book in the trilogy. I'm not sure. If I'm not mistaken, that's what it was. So that's a good surprise. And so all this has happened prior to this announcement, which is why I'm like, if you put the pieces in order and put all together, you'll start to see a pattern, and you'll start to see how all of this stuff kind of begins to shape the future outlook for Star Wars. You begin to see how Heir to the Empire is going to become more of a prominent story within the Star Wars universe once again. Skywalker Academy appearing, let's say, in season 3 of The Mandalorian, or maybe in its own show, who knows, around the same time period that Heir to the Empire originally took place, which is also the same time period that The Mandalorian takes place. You start to see the connections between the stories. So now we've got Ahsoka Tano, Ezra Bridger, Luke Skywalker, Grandmaster Luke Skywalker at this point, taking on his first generation of Force users, of young Jedi. Grogu being, as far as we know, Grogu's his first student. Maybe it's not, but from what we can tell, based on season 2 of The Mandalorian, that's the only student he has. We don't know if he has any more. He could possibly have some already. When we see Luke in season 2 of The Mandalorian, he may have already established Skywalker Academy, and now they're going to get the ball rolling to get that on screen, and we're going to see that. Luke Skywalker and Thrawn in Heir to the Empire were adversaries, of course, because the Thrawn is trying to reestablish the Imperial might and the Imperial power, and Luke Skywalker, of course, and Leia and Han Solo all being on the side of the New Republic, trying to reestablish the New Republic. So all of this can still kind of sort of intertwine and be retrofitted into the current canon story of this time period between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. I'm just more curious as to how all of this is going to play out, because I don't think that Luke Skywalker is going to be the most prominent. He's not going to be prominently featured in the story. This is just my guess. I think he's going to be more in I'd like to see him more in like of a Yoda role from the prequels, where he's mainly there teaching students, but when he shows up, he's going to be the Luke Skywalker that we saw in season 2 of The Mandalorian. Like, he means business. But I think the main characters, hopefully, will be Ezra Bridger and Ahsoka Tano facing off against Thrawn. and this could possibly take place in the unknown regions. Like there's certain ways that this could play out. Like it wouldn't make sense. Like I'm going to speculate a little bit here. Given the sequel trilogy story, and I'm not debating the quality or lack thereof quality. This is not a sequel trilogy debate. I'm just saying, given the story, it wouldn't make sense for there to be, some small amount of Jedi around during that time period, at least in the known galaxy. So if they're going the route of creating a Skywalker Academy, and we don't know if Ben Skywalker killed Grogu, or if Grogu was in like this hypothetical first generation of Jedi Knights that was around during the time of this Mandalorian heir to the Empire crossover story that they're going to do with the Filoniverse, or I'm speculating that they're going to do with the Filoniverse. This generation goes into the unknown regions where Thrawn is to the ascendancy. Let's say in the first season of this show, Thrawn and the ascendancy and the Imperial remnant that are reporting directly to Thrawn are the main antagonists. But then through this, we learn about the Grisk and how much of a threat the Grisk are to the galaxy, which puts our heroes, Ahsoka, Ezra, maybe Hera, maybe the entire what's remaining of the Ghost Crew, puts them at odds with not only Thrawn but also the Grisk. And so now you're looking at a situation where you might have to pick the lesser of two evils. You might have to choose between, do we take on the Grisk and Thrawn, or do we have a better chance of working with Thrawn and the Chiss and this his loyal Imperial contingency to take on this larger threat, which is the Grisk? And to explain the Grisk to everyone who doesn't know, because that's something not many people know. The Grisk are an alien force from outside of the known galaxy. They're outside of Chiss space. Like, we don't even know at this point in this story where they originate. We only know that they've come from outside of the galaxy, and their conquest and the way they conquer species is different from what we've seen in previous versions of Star Wars. Like, they infiltrate, they learn about the culture and the people of a potential of a species or a planet that they're getting ready to invade. Like, they learn everything about them. Like, they find out what their weaknesses are, they find out like what their strengths are, and they start to I don't want to say not invade, but infiltrate and what is it? I forgot the term. It's the agencies like the CIA use it all the time, like where they come in and they kind of find any opposition to whatever the current ruling governing body is of a particular people or nation, and they kind of help the dissidents get into a position to fight these regimes, and then they kind of assimilate these people into their culture. So like, they basically get them to fight one another, and then when they're at their weakest, they get them to kind of sort of willingly join the Grisk. So it's not like they don't use brute force outright unless it absolutely necessary. Um, they're very interesting. Like, we haven't seen them actually do this, but through the New Thrawn novel, we are starting to learn about how they operate through the eyes of Thrawn, who's also learning about how they operate. Like, they will kind of spy and sit back and observe a species for a long time and gather as much intel as they can, like, just to figure out what is the best way that they can get these people to join them willingly. So Thrawn understands how much of a threat that is, not only to his people but to the Empire and to everyone else in the galaxy. Like, if there is an entire civilization that is out there who are conquerors, but conquer in a way that the people that they conquer willingly fall under their banner, like, he understands how much of a threat that is. And so that's going to be the uphill battle for him, at least that's what I'm speculating, to get the heroes to understand that he may be their enemy, but he is not the threat. The Grisk are the real threat. And I think that if that's the direction they choose, I think it could be very interesting, and it would be for me, a welcome, like, I don't know, I'm on board with it. I don't know how y'all feel about that, but like, for me, that kind of gets me excited because it's not a rehash of, well, at least the Grisk, they're not really a rehash of any particular villain that we've already seen in Star Wars. Like, this would be kind of a new threat to the galaxy. They're not I'm not saying, I won't say they aren't Force users, but because I really don't know. We don't really know too much about them to this point. So I'm not saying, I don't know if they have any Force users in their ranks, but in the stories thus far, they haven't exhibited any affinity towards the Force or anyone in their midst that uses the Force. Not to say that they don't have them, but from what we can tell, they haven't had need to use them. So, but that could offer another dynamic to them if they do in fact have Force users in their ranks and they have their own version of the Jedi or the Sith. That would be kind of cool. But between the Imperial Remnant, the Chiss Ascendancy, and the Grisk, you've got really 3 strong adversaries that a Luke Skywalker, Ahsoka Tano, Ezra Bridger, Hera, Syndulla, Sabine, the Mandalorians, Din Djarin, all of them would have their hands full taking on these opponents. And that's a conflict that could easily fill that 30-year gap, or at least the majority of it. So that's pretty much that's my report. If y'all got any questions, I know still some people watching, but like, that's kind of sort of where my head is right now, given the news of Skywalker Academy and Heir to the Empire, as well as some other novels. I'll actually read some out, but if you have any questions, drop them into the chat. But another big book, another significant book being added to the Essential Legends collection is Path of Destruction, which is book 1 of the Darth Bane series. And we know that, Acolyte, there's a series called Acolyte that is in development that will be, I want to say that's coming out on Disney Plus, but that's about the Sith and the Rule of Two. Bane established the Rule of Two, so now they've added the original Bane novel that Drew Karpyshyn wrote into the Essential Legends collection. Like, there's no coincidence there. Like, that's them saying, like I was saying earlier, that's them saying, hey, look guys, we know that you guys love these books and these are some really good stories, and fans, they've got a cult following, and we acknowledge publicly that these are some great stories, and we may or may not be pulling or I mean, hopefully, you could really take that Path of Destruction book. I mean, if you could adapt it into a screenplay or a series, like it, that trilogy would land well with fans. Um, it really does a good job of explaining the rule of two as well as the ideology of the Sith. Um, Especially the Sith during this era of the rule of two and the Sith that preceded the rule of two and all the events that led up to the formation of the rule of two. Will Heir to the Empire stream weekly to the like the Mandalorian? I would. That's a good question. I don't know. I would like that to stream. I don't think you could do a trilogy, but you would have to truncate those books a little bit. Like there would be a lot that you'd have to take out. And I think because Star Wars has had good success on Disney Plus, I would hope that they would make a series out of that trilogy of books. And it's not going to be in a direct adaptation, but I think a lot of the characters and story arcs are going to be pulled from that novel and incorporated into the Ahsoka Tano show. We'll see elements of it there. We'll see elements of it probably more so in Mandalorian season 3. But I wouldn't be surprised if they do pop up in Ahsoka, because like I said, Ahsoka name dropped Grand Admiral Thrawn in season 2 of Mandalorian. So, and we know that her show is going to be pretty much the sequel to the Rebels series, and you know that'll be where we get the live action version of Ahsoka, because Rebels was a animated series that premiered originally on Disney XD and now it's available on Disney Plus. But Disney XD was kind of like that was really the first version of Disney Plus. It was an app, and they had a channel, but I don't think it was. I don't know. It wasn't. I don't know what the numbers were and how many people were paying for that on cable. Can't imagine it was that many people. The app was very popular though, and then that was kind of. I mean, that's really the foundation for them to get into the streaming war was Disney XD, because Disney would put a lot of their content on that app after it premiered, and sometimes like concurrently with as the show was running, they would put it up on Disney XD. The only thing I watched on it, of course, was Rebels, but I do remember that there were other shows that were available to watch on Disney XD, and they were all Disney properties, of course. Yeah, so I think Heir to the Empire will likely just be adapted, and it'll show up in elements of it will show up in the Ahsoka Tano show and in Mandalorian season 3, and possibly in if they're doing a Skywalker Academy show, then it would probably appear somewhat in that as well. So yeah, that's a good question. That all speculation at this point, but it's really easy to connect the dots with this move. You know what I'm saying? Like if you just take a step back and look at the landscape of Star Wars right now and what all was revealed, if you will, within Mandalorian season 3 and what Mandalorian season 3 set up, you know, all of this starts to make sense. Also, for Mace Windu fans, Shatterpoint is being added into the Essential Legends collections. Shatterpoint is a very popular novel. It was, I believe that's the first novel written about Mace Windu. I want to say, maybe I'm wrong, but it's the first one I remember, and it introduced his power known as Shatterpoint, which is he's able to use the Force to find like structural weaknesses in things. So like if he comes into contact with something, like he can sense the structural weaknesses in it and exploit it and destroy it if he wants to. He used it on battle droids, and you see him actually use this power in the first animated Clone Wars show that premiered on Cartoon Network. Pretty cool, pretty cool. And I don't know if that series is up, but it will be coming to Disney Plus soon if it's not up there already. I think it only had 2 seasons before George Lucas decided to go in a different direction and go with the CGI version of the show, which had the longer run. That's the 7 series show that most people know and love, but OG fans remember the original Clone Wars animated TV show. All right. Let me see. Now, the Path of Destruction, I'll talk about. That'll probably be something I'll talk about next week because we're approaching an hour now. But I can see them using Path of Destruction, which is the Darth Bane novel, in this Acolyte series for Disney Plus. Like, and if they do it right, like that series that could be it's going to be like a TV 16, 17 if they adapt it as it is from the novel. It's very all right. So it's not like dark, but it's Sith that we're talking about. So like there are things that happen, and it's violent for sure. It's more violent than any of the content that we have for Star Wars right now, like hands down. Like nothing comes close to it. So like it's not gory, of course, but there are some things that are explored that kind of showcase the brutality of the Sith, but also gives you an understanding of, not necessarily to empathize with them, but you get an understanding of their disposition and why they are the way they are and why they view the Jedi the way they do. Bane, that is inspired by Revan in many ways, and the teachings of Revan. That is what guides him to create the Rule of Two. So if that's what the Acolyte story is going to explore, then I totally understand why this book being added into this Essential Legends collection, I can totally see why that was the case. And I know there's a lot of Bane fans that are happy with this news, and if they aren't, they should be. Definitely should be. I'm gonna go 5 more minutes here. But yeah, if you're a fan of the Sith and you haven't read that novel, then do yourself a favor and go read that. Like, go pick that up. I'm pretty sure it's probably like $7 or $8, $10 at the most, probably. You can go pick that up on Amazon. Like, you don't have to get the Essential Legends edition. I think with the Essential Legends edition, they're going to add, of course, some new artwork. There'll be some new things within the novel that aren't in the current versions of them. So there's some added benefit to purchasing the Essential Legends. But if you don't want to wait for these books to come out, then like I said, they're all available for purchase and you can go get them now. So that will be Heir to the Empire, Path of Destruction, and Shatterpoint. And so that's just the beginning. I'm pretty sure we'll have some more announcements, but I'm thinking in the near term, these are the ones that they've selected because they're probably the ones that have some sort of series or in development or connected to a series in development. There was a rumor that there's a Mace Windu series, a young Mace Windu series that's on the way for Disney Plus. That wasn't announced at the Disney convention. or the was the investor call. That wasn't announced, but we've been hearing rumors about that for close to a year now. So it would not surprise me at all if we see that pop up, or at least if that's announced. That might get announced on May, yo. No, like for real. That could be announced May 4th. That could be that would be a blockbuster May 4th announcement. Mace Windu, young Mace Windu series on the way. They announce, who's been cast as the young Mace. They'll say, because based on the rumors, we'll have some scenes. I don't know if Samuel L. Jackson will be doing some voiceover work or he'll actually appear in the series. I can't remember. I need to go. I need to get back on those rumors because that kind of died on the vine, or at least I stopped paying attention to it a couple months ago. But the rumor was that Mace Windu, or not Mace Windu, but Samuel L. Jackson was going to be in the show in some form or fashion. They would recast a younger version to play him, probably as a Padawan. There was a comic book series, and the name escapes. He had hair and things. So I'm thinking that the young version is going to be that version of Mace Windu, the Padawan, because then I can having Padawan Mace gives us some flexibility within the story, because now we can explore a time period where, and it had legs because you got a young Mace, and so I don't know how old Mace Windu was during Revenge of the Sith, but you could get at least three to four series out of a young Mace Windu story for sure. But yeah, hey, I'll look into this. I'll get some more research done on that topic, because Shatterpoint, that just clicked for me on the broadcast. Like, all right, yeah, Shatterpoint. We did have a young Mace Windu rumored story come out a couple months ago about Mace Windu, Samuel L. Jackson appearing, a younger version of himself also being cast, and it would tell Mace's story. A lot of people wanted to see Mace survive the confrontation with the Emperor, because as you know, like he's so his arm was cut off, and then the Emperor uses Force lightning and kind of yeets him off the balcony, and there's a long fall. But we know that Jedi can survive falling from long distances. They can use the Force to kind of as a reverse thruster to soften land from a high distance. Shout out to the High Republic, because they showcased that in that novel, in one of those novels. Which one was that? I forget. But yeah, Bell Zettifar actually he uses that, like his vector is destroyed. He has to eject. Oh no, it's not destroyed. He jumps out. He has to save a child that's falling from like a high altitude, and he uses the Force. And the way it's described, it's like the same principle as like a reverse thruster to brace his landing. And he comes down, he lands safely, and that is basically his trial. He becomes a Jedi Knight. Little known fact. So yeah, all of that stuff, man, all that good stuff. But hey, we hit the hour mark. Thank you for joining. I'll be back next week, next Sunday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on this channel.